Well, good morning. It's Monday, February 27th already. Time marches on. Okay, we just finished up module number 4. That was a short 1 week uh, effort that we put into it. And it had to do with negligence, premises liability, and related topics. Um, Once again, I want to commend you on the good work that you're doing. Some of the topics that you chose that were of interest to me also. Somebody mentioned threats to umpires and referees. We talked about tickets and licensing, premises liability, hazing, certifications, Good Samaritan statutes. There was an interesting thing about buying meals for students, typically high school and middle school students who couldn't afford it at the end of a game or a field trip. Um, Concussion was a big topic. Just to go through some of them in a little more detail. Some of you, I made a note on your discussion boards, get to go to the head of the class, head of torts class. Good for you. You had a pretty good grasp of that subject in law school that many of your friends are going through right now, as if they happen to be in law school. In any event, one of the critical elements of tort law, of course, is negligence. It's 4 elements: duty, breach, causation, and damage, as we learned in the lecture. All 4 elements have to be present. Some detail that I wanted to go into a little bit just to amplify your comments. The first one had to do with the status of a person on your premises. Remember, we had an invitee, a business invitee, a licensee, and a trespasser. If you look on the back of your next ticket that you buy to a sporting event, you may well see language that says this is a license. And as you'll recall, a licensee is owed lesser duty than a business invitee. And you're thinking, well, wait a minute. If you paid for a ticket, aren't you a business invitee? Well, I put the language on the back of Gonzaga's tickets, for example, several years ago, and we use license language. It's an attempt to reduce the status of the person on the premises, so that the owner can say that they owe a lesser duty. Most likely, in such circumstances, a person who buys a ticket is going to be a business invitee. One of you, or a couple of you, picked up on the notion of attractive nuisance, something very important for sport enterprise operators. If you operate facilities that are attractive to children, remember they're minors, they're not capable of making a lot of legal decisions. If you operate a facility that has equipment or things on it that are attractive to minors, you have to take extra care, because the minor may come in there and want to play on the swing set, swim in the swimming pool, jump on the trampoline, whatever might be attractive to a kid, and you will owe them that higher duty. One other aspect of tort law that we talked about, the Good Samaritan statutes. One thing to remember about Good Samaritan statutes, while they do offer some form of immunity, typically the law will still hold an actor acting as a Good Samaritan to the standard of their training. So if a doctor or a paramedic happens to be a Good Samaritan, that is, they come upon an event, they're still held to the standard of their training. In the example of an EMT, for example, if the EMT fails to stabilize the head or the neck, which is a part of their standard of care, then the Good Samaritan statute may not provide all the protection that it was supposed to. Some of you mentioned certifications for various fitness, coaching, life skills, that sort of thing, organizations that provide a certification. Some of you noted the opportunity for scamming. That is, some organizations, their certificates aren't worth the powder to blow them away, while others are more respected. A little antitrust issue slips in here, where a certifying agency may conspire with others to have them select only its certification, thereby excluding others. Something to kind of keep an eye on. Concussion, a huge topic, and one which many of you focused on, rightfully so. One of your exercises that many of you picked had you find a state statute, and there's a variation in some of the statutes, as you noticed. For example, critically, some state statutes address only schools, while others address schools and clubs. Some of you noted, gee, a high school or a middle school athlete at school uh, gets the benefit of concussion protocols, but if they play on an AAU team or on a club team, that team doesn't have to follow the concussion protocols. So just a difference in the law that you need to be aware of. Um, One final note on concussion. Many of you picked up the ethical dilemma, the ethical confrontation that you have about concussion, and it's a variation on the old playing hurt uh, concept. The coach wants to keep the athlete in, the athlete wants to stay in. They've already been hit in the head, and maybe they're not thinking straight, but the coach ought to be thinking straight. And so it's a very difficult place to be in. But with these concussion protocols out, that statute, those rules do set the standard of care. And if you fall below the standard of care by not following the protocol, you're into that negligence and negligence per se area that we've talked about. And finally, hazing. Hazing was a big topic that many of you picked up on. It's been around forever. It is a common practice. As I mentioned to many of you, many administrators put their head in the sand when it comes to hazing. They don't want to know. They don't want to be informed about hazing activities. They let team captains handle that sort of thing. Dangerous and risky style of management because hazing statutes exist in many states. In Washington, for example, um, the hazing statute prohibits certain types of conduct. And more importantly, for you, the manager, and for your superiors, the hazing statute in Washington can impose personal liability on those who knew and or condoned hazing up to the level of a board member. In the case of Gonzaga, for example, that wording in the statute automatically places pressure on a board member to put pressure on a president, to put pressure on an AD or a club supervisor, faculty advisor, to be aware of and to prevent hazing. So that's a long way to roll downhill, but if it goes really, really bad, liability can attach all the way up to a board member. I've mentioned hazing is prevalent. It goes on everywhere. It goes on with teams, all sports teams. Marching bands are form. Hazing can take place in those. In fact, a year or two ago, the director of the marching band and some members of the marching band at a Florida university went to jail because there was a death of a member of the marching band who was hazed. I've even seen hazing in the chess club. So it's something that is prevalent. It's dangerous, and it's easy to look the other way. But there is real danger and risk in looking the other way as a sport enterprise manager. Hot topics this week: the Texas wrestler, uh, gender identification issues. She is a female transitioning to male. She was permitted by Texas Athletic Association rule to only wrestle girls. She was taking testosterone as part of her transition, and some opponents forfeited. Some went ahead and wrestled. In any event, this student, became the state champion. Interesting issues there, social and political issues that come up in an issue or in a situation like that. The most interesting one I read is since this transitioning person is taking testosterone, how is that different from doping? putting a chemical substance in your body that changes your strength or performance level vis-a-vis your opponent. It's a slippery slope, particularly in an area such as gender identity. And we're talking politics and social norms here, where there is no physical or scientific proof underlying gender identity. It seems to be the state of the circumstances now that gender identity is what the person says it is, and this can loop back to the what I mentioned last week. You know, the male volleyball star who wants to play for the women's volleyball team. These are some issues that you're going to face, and they raise serious and important political and social issues. And it sometimes makes you wonder whether standards are shifting sands. If doping in one area is not doping in another area, then where are the standards? Okay, I just wanted to remind you about our big picture. This module had to do with liability, as many of them do, tort liability specifically. And remember our big picture rule or philosophy that if you manage your enterprise in a way that avoids liability, that's a good secondary benefit, but the first benefit is it's the right thing to do. Okay, we're into Module 5 now, which is our last push. It's a 2-week module. A little bit of academic work in the book. That is, the chapters in the book are short on marketing issues. So that you should be able to get that done quickly so that you can focus on your paper and prepare for your final exam. Those will be the 3 things that you'll be doing in the next couple of weeks in Module 5. And I look forward to hearing from you if you have questions about your paper or you need a little guidance or something like that. Some of you undoubtedly will have questions about the exam. So feel free to contact me by email or by phone. That's just fine. Okay, that'll do it for now. So happy to be with you. And once again, you're doing good work and keep it up. See you next time.